Stay tuned. Coming up in this episode, I interview Fire Chief Matthew Marlow from the Medway-Grapeville Fire District in New Baltimore, New York. Matt tells a near-miss story where he was working at a residential dwelling fire when he fell through a fire-weakened floor. But first, let's pay the bills. Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com. Hello and welcome to episode 266 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this program is to help improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SAMatters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming and time to avoid bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from my office in St. Paul, Minnesota, having just returned from delivering 2 situational awareness programs for the Maryland Fire Chiefs Association in Westminster, Maryland, and for the Flight Bridge ED Fast 19 conference in Nashville, Tennessee. Sandwiched between those 2 events, I facilitated a full-day leadership development program for the Scott Township Fire Department in Evansville, Indiana. All right, let's jump into today's feature segment, my interview with Fire Chief Matt Marlow from the Medway-Grapeville Fire District in New Baltimore, New York. Matt had a near-miss event where he was working at a residential dwelling fire and fell through a fire-weakened floor. He's got quite a story to tell and some lessons to learn. So let's jump into the feature segment. Hey everyone, I'm super excited today to have with me Matt Marlow, who is the chief of the Medway-Grapeville Fire District in New Baltimore, New York. He's been a member of the district for 10 years and has served as the company's training officer for the past 6 years. He's the father of 2 children, Abigail, who's 8, and Joshua, who's 5. When he's not volunteering his time with the Medway-Grapeville Fire District, he's the chief of operations for the Greenville Rescue Squad and an EMT with the Town of Coxsackie Ambulance, and likes to pretend, this is his bio, likes to pretend that he's good at brewing beer. What do you mean pretend, Matt? Does that mean you're good but you're humble, or does it mean you just haven't figured it out yet?
Maybe a little bit of both. My girlfriend and I joke all the time that I'm the most humble individual she's ever met, and that I'm very good at. No, I just started to learn how to brew beer, and so I'm still developing it.
Well, what inspired that?
I enjoy drinking beer, but I hate paying the high cost at the store. So I figure if I can save myself some money,
okay,
I'll brew my own.
Now, how do you learn? Do you take a class, or do you just Google, hey, how do you make beer?
So I've got some friends that are much more skilled at it that I've been talking to and learning from them, and a lot of stuff on the internet, some classic works like how to brew beer and that sort of stuff. Starts off with kit beers and then moves on to actually procuring the actual ingredients and doing it a much more traditional way. So.
Now, we're not here to talk about beer making, but I do have a couple of questions here. So once you whip up your recipe, so to speak, then I'm guessing you have to let it sit for a while to ferment. Is that?
Yeah, sits for a week to 10 days, and then a little bit longer in the bottles. Once you rack it into the bottles, you let it sit for a little while to condition. So I normally sit about a month before I actually enjoy the fruits of the labor, or end up dumping the entire batch if it didn't come out right.
Oh,
Oh, wrong. So.
Oh yeah, I guess it does take a little while to kind of perfect your recipe or get it to be to your taste. Have you perfected it yet? Have you had a good batch?
I've had several good batches, but nothing that I want to share apart from my absolute closest friends.
Okay, yeah, got it. Fair enough. Well, we're not here to talk about beer making. We're here to talk about a near miss event that occurred on February 14th, 2015, in New Baltimore. But before we talk about the near miss event itself, give us a little backstory about yourself, how you got started in the trade, and then a little bit about the town that you serve and the department itself.
Absolutely. So I was not a fire service child growing up. My oldest brother, who's retired Navy now, joined the fire company when he was stationed in Maryland and then in Texas. And so I kind of got a little bit of his storytelling and whatnot once I got much older. I didn't join the fire company until 10 years ago. So it was really, this is my first and only experience with a fire company is with my current company. And it's been some of the greatest 10 years of my life. We are a very small department. We serve in the town of New Baltimore. We serve the western 2/3 of the town, approximately 30 square miles. Population is just a little over about 1,000 people, really. It's very rural, very wide open. There's, two main roads that divide the district into quarters, and you've got to take both of those to get to any call in the district. We run approximately 120 calls a year, running on one station. We do first response EMS, which makes up a bulk of our call volume. Out of that 120, approximately 90 of them are EMS calls, ranging from simple lift assists all the way up to cardiac arrests and the whole gamut of EMS. Fire calls, we'll do accident extrication, environmental hazards, pump outs, service calls. Working fires are rare in our district, thankfully. I like to pretend it's because we do a great job of fire prevention, but I think it's really just because there's not a lot of people. So the opportunities for working fires really is a minimal opportunity in our district.
Matt.
Yeah.
Do me one really quick, solid favor.
Yeah.
Your computer somehow shifted so that I'm seeing a lot of very bright light coming through that open window and kind of darkening you. Oh, yeah.
Now,
like half your face was dark because the iris was kind of
building a mystique. That's all.
Now we can see your handsomeness much better. Before we were only seeing half of it. Now we're seeing the whole thing. All right. So working fire is not that common. Do you have mutual aid, auto aid, anything like that with your neighbors?
We do have we have automatic aid Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We have automatic aid from our sister company in the town of New Baltimore, so the New Baltimore Fire District. We have them on automatic aid, and then we also have from the Greenville Fire District. So from east and west, we have mutual aid coming, and then we have another agreement. We are the very top of our county. And so just to the north of us in Albany County is the Queens Hollow Fire District. And they are put on automatic aid for rapid intervention. So we have some agreements set up between manpower and apparatus from the east and the west, and then rapid intervention for anything structurally related from the north.
Now, just for reference, for those who may not know the geography of that area, where are you located in relation to maybe the nearest big city that someone could?
Does Albany count as a big city?
Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say because so we're approximately.
Capital? Is Albany the capital?
It is the capital. Many people aren't aware of that. A lot of people don't know. But So we sit approximately 20 miles south of Albany. Our town is on the west side of the Hudson River, and then we are on the western edge of that town. Just the northern edge of the Catskills is where we are.
Okay. All right. And then with your mutual aid, auto aid, RIT team response for a report of a residential fire, what kind of turnout would that get on an average day? You know, not like best case scenario or worst case scenario, but an average day, what kind of turnout would that bring for you?
So on an average day, our company would turn out of a fleet of three, kind of frontline apparatus. We'll get an ETA and a tender off the floor.
What's an ETA?
ETA is engine tanker. So it's think of an engine with 1,000 gallons of water on it.
Okay.
It's a little bit more of an expanded tank reserve because we are exclusively rural water. If we're getting water, it's all by tender or drafting. So we have it's a 6-man cab ETA and then a 2-man cab tender that we'll send. Manpower wise, like you said, the deal on an average, report of a residential fire, we'll get anywhere from 8 to 10 people responding. Some of those directly to the station, many of them POV. That's why we set up the automatic aid agreements that we did. New Baltimore Fire is a much larger district or a much larger company than we are. They have significantly more people. They cover the town itself, where the population center is. So they have a larger group to draw from, younger. So we set up an agreement with them. Same thing with Greenville, larger population center. So on that automatic alarm assignment, we'll get 2 to 3 pieces of apparatus coming from our sister companies, as well as another 15 to 20 individuals on that first alarm. And
do you and your auto aid, do you guys train together? Like if you're gonna do like live fire training or something, do you all come together and do it together or not? Some do, some don't. I'm just curious if you guys do that.
We've gone through ebbs and flows. I think like every volunteer fire department does. We are a 100% volunteer fire district. We go through ebbs and flows where some years we'll do a lot of training together. Some years we won't really. The one thing that we do historically have done is the rapid intervention team that I'd mentioned that comes from Queens Hollow is actually a regional team that some of our members make up and some of New Baltimore's members make up as well. And so those three companies, we will get together and we will do RIT team exercises just to make sure that we're working well together, because I suppose if anybody should work very well together, it should be the RIT team, especially if they're coming from different locations. They need to really know who's coming with what, who's going to be doing what. And so we do train together. As far as larger company drills, we haven't done anything significant in a while, actually.
So this, I want to pause for just a second, because this regional RIT team concept is interesting to me. So how does that work?
Well, we recognized several years ago that none of our companies in Greene County or Southern Albany County could provide RIT team coverage to a fire. We just don't have enough manpower. We don't have enough resources. You're looking at having to put 8 to 12 people on nothing but standby, and none of our companies can do that. And so several years ago, these 3 companies, we all got together and said, listen, we've got the members who are trained in the techniques. They've taken the classes through New York State Fire. They've got the the tools and the techniques, why don't we establish a regional team that can go anywhere that it's needed? And so we cover much of what we call the Valley, the western portion of the Hudson River in our county. We cover many of the districts there, up into Albany County. We've gone almost up to the Albany County line before, or the Albany city limit on several calls, which is, a 15-mile drive for us. That's how far we've actually traveled for this. But we did it simply because we recognized that, if a fire drops in my district, I've got enough people to do suppression, not nearly enough to manage the rapid intervention requirements.
And how long is this regional team concept? How long has it been in place?
I would say probably for about 8 or 9 years. They were putting it together as I was really getting into the fire service. It was something that was just really coming into fruition. They had been talking about it for some time, and it really became a thing while I was in my recruit phase.
Okay. All right. All right. So let's work our way around to the day of the event. So it was February 14th. I don't know if in that region, if that would be a snowy day, a rainy day, a sunny day. So what day of the week was it? Do you remember?
It was a Saturday.
Saturday, okay.
It was a bitter cold Saturday. I know in some of the pictures that I sent you, you'll see the ice on the structure. And I have some other photos of just members that were taken, and they are covered in ice. It's just that classic wintertime in the Northeast working fire picture of crew members. They're just covered in ice. They move and stuff shatters off of them. It was well below freezing. It was a Saturday. The weather, so it was clear. I remember it was very sunny, just cold. And I had gotten up that morning. Saturdays, my daughter is in a dance class. So she had really just started. So she was 5 at the time. She had just started dance class, doing ballet. And my son was 2. And so I had them, we were going down to town. She was going to dance class, and I was waiting in the lobby for her to get out of class in about half an hour or so when our tones dropped for a working fire. So,
if you can remember, what did they dispatch it as? What did they say?
If I remember right, it was dispatched as a working fire, it's on a road that's not well traveled, and so I know that it had a head start. So by the time the first dispatch came in, it was a working fire, and we received several other updates from our dispatch center of additional 911 calls, which, as you know, is a queue. When they said we've taken multiple calls on this fire, that this isn't a furnace malfunction. This isn't steam from something. This is a fire.
And at that time, were you the chief of the department then?
I wasn't the chief. I was the third assistant chief at the time. So we have the chief and then 3 assistants, okay, some captains and some lieutenants. Okay. So I was third assistant chief at the time. Traveled with my turnout gear, air pack, everything in my car. Mm-hmm. But I also have car seats in the back of my car for a reason, and I've got my 2 kids that I'm responsible for on this particular day. So I really just had to sit there and wait until she got out of dance class, and then figure out what I was going to do with her and with my son.
Well, hold on. I assume your pager, you put it on monitor, so.
Of course.
You hear the size up of the first in. What is that?
So with our dispatch, we're in the middle of a radio transition right now, but at the time, we had a low band dispatch over radio, and then all of our fire ground work was done on high band on a different frequency. My pager, obviously I got the initial call, I got some of the updates from dispatch before our arrival, and then really the last fire-related piece that I heard was the chief at the time getting on scene and declaring, a working fire. I don't remember what he said was involved at the time, but that he was calling for additional mutual aid. Basically, when we had that automatic aid assignment, they're sending one truck. So he had asked for a full company response from both New Baltimore and Greenville, as well as second tones for our fire company. So that was really the last fire-related transmission I heard over the pager. Everything else was just units calling en route, notifying dispatch that they were traveling to the scene. But all the other continual size up, unit assignments, everything like that was done on high band, which I didn't have my radio with me. That was in the car. That was not within earshot. So I really had no knowledge of what was going on the scene for probably about an hour.
Okay. So do you wait a half an hour for your daughter to finish dance class, or do you grab her and say, "Come on, we're going"?
Of course you do. My kids are great. They recognize the sacrifices that our families make for dad to do what he does. But I wasn't about to barge into that dance class and be like, we gotta go. No, I waited out that period of time. All the while I was on my cell phone texting every babysitter that I have, in the phone book, trying to find somebody that would meet me at my house. I could do a quick drop off and go. Probably about the third person that I texted, they said, "Yeah, sure, I can be there in 20 minutes." So perfect. My daughter finished out the dance class. You go through this interesting, I need to get the kids moving, but I don't want them to panic. So, it was a speedy walk to the car.
While she's holding her shoes in her hand.
I let her put her shoes back on. We got her, got the kids buckled up and obeyed the traffic laws because, I wasn't going to call out of service until, I wasn't going to call en route until I was actually en route. So I didn't want to be running lights and sirens with the kids and all that crazy stuff. So traveled back up to the house and sat in my driveway for about 5 minutes waiting for the babysitter to get there.
Hold on a second. When you got to the car, did you then have access to your two-way radio?
So I did. I was attempting to get a hold of command, so the chief who had called command on the scene. But where this house sits, where the fire was, is down in a low spot in the district, and we've since done a lot more work mapping where the dead zones are in our district, where we can have line of sight communication very clearly. But if we're working off of our repeater system, which we generally do, there are certain areas in our district where we can't talk to anybody. So while low band transmissions would travel out relatively well, the high band system wasn't getting over that hill to where I was. And so I still couldn't really raise the scene on the radio. I couldn't hear much of what was going on.
Okay. All right. So just to summarize, the low band communication between the scene and dispatch was not a problem. Just in the scene communications from command to interior and such was not a problem. Just your attempt to contact them
was
a distance miles away was problematic.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you get home. Yeah. You do the babysitter handoff.
Yep.
And then how far is it to the scene?
It was less than 2 miles to the scene.
Oh, okay.
It was a very quick trip from my house to the scene. Now, the walk from my car to the scene, because I was arriving so late, was a little bit longer because we just had the units stacked down this road. I was parked probably about a quarter mile away from the scene by the time I got there. So I arrived, I got my turnout gear on. I finally was able to call. So leaving the driveway, I was able to call en route finally to our dispatchers, let them know that I was en route, called on scene, got there, got my stuff geared up, and began walking up towards the scene. And the first thing I could see was just the ice. Already, they've been working at this for a while. I can see a bulk of the actual suppression has concluded. They're beginning to do some overhaul in some areas of the structure. There's still a little bit of interior work being done, but we've largely got it contained. And so I'm looking at.
Hey, Matt, let's pause for a moment to describe the structure, because this is the first time we're going to hear about what, kind of house it is, size of house it is, single story, 2-story, old, new. Describe that up for me.
It was a 2-story raised ranch structure, relatively large, probably on the order of about 2,000 square feet, which is a large home for our area. As I said, raised ranch, and it's set on not a cliff, but on a rather severe drop off. And so while you entered the structure ground level, if there was a porch that went around the back that sat right over this drop off that would go down 50, 60 feet. And so there was really no seaside access to this structure. The FAST team was there, and they had done a tremendous job of laddering the other 3 sides of the structure. So we had great access to the second floor. There was heavy fire damage to the second floor. Found out later it was a furnace room fire that had spread to the rest of the structure. It was set back from the road a distance, and so we were laying hand lines in. The driveway was very narrow and twisty, and so we really had to do an extended yard lay from the street to even make entry. And I think eventually we were able to get 1 truck into the driveway to make that a little bit easier. But it was heavily damaged from fire and just covered in ice. You can imagine how much water you spray in the course of a structure fire, and it all stayed right there.
How many firefighters are on the scene by the time you get there?
By this point, we probably have 40 firefighters on the scene between the 4 companies that were there. As I said, we had our fire company, New Baltimore, Greenville, and Queens Hollow. The FAST agency, the 2 mutual aid agencies, and then ourselves. Probably about 40 members by the time I got on scene.
Okay. And since the bulk of the fire was knocked down, were they in overhaul mode? Were they in cleanup mode? What mode were they in when you got there?
So we were transitioning from that attack mode into overhaul. The crew was still hitting a few of the heavier hot spots on the second floor, but the first floor we had gotten a good knock on the fire, and they were starting to overhaul down there. And some crews were starting to work their way through more in a salvage mode through the bedrooms upstairs.
Okay. And so you approach the scene, and so take it from there, whether you report to command or, where it goes.
I got on scene, reported to command. Our accountability officer stands pretty much right next to the incident commander, so that everybody that's arriving, they check in with accountability before they even talk to the incident commander, because they're going to start sending you off to do something. So you want to make sure so I checked in with accountability. I walked over to the chief and I said, hey, what's going on? And he gave me a very quick summary, which was basically, well, there was a fire and it's mostly out now. We're into overhaul. And so I said, all of our ICS positions had really been taken up at that point. We had incident commander, operations was being run by one of the chiefs from New Baltimore. We had a water supply officer out on the road dealing with the tender shuttle, because again, rural water supply, that's what we have. And so I said, where do you need me? And I think I speak for a lot of chiefs. It's actually nice when you get to revert back to a black helmet for a little while and go do work and actually enjoy the job as we all got into it for. So when Ken, the chief, looked at me and said, well, you go talk to operations, see where he wants you, go play, kind of, that go break things, go overhaul. I was excited. So I threw my pack on and walked over to operations to get a further assignment from that chief to figure out where he wanted me to go. While I was walking over to the scene, over to operations, I took a little tour around the two other sides of the building that I could see. I could see the Alpha side very, very clearly, but I wanted to see the Bravo and the Delta side. And as I walked around the Bravo side, that's where I realized I'd never seen the house before. That's where I realized there was this huge drop off the back of the structure. So I noted that in the back of my head, saying, well, we're not going out the back windows if we need to get out of here in a hurry. Continued around, and I'd seen buildings well laddered. There's a couple hoses going into the building, and the crews are doing a lot of work pulling walls and things like that. So as I came back to operations, I talked to him for a few moments. And actually, one of those pictures that I did send you, you'll see the white hat with the air pack with it back to this camera. That's me talking to operations before I went into the structure. I was, getting, his orders to figure out what I was going to do. And he said, I want you to go up to the second floor, and I want you to tag in with the crew that's up there and start doing salvage. The homeowners had several kids that lived with them, and there was a lot of personal possessions that we were going to try and salvage. And so that's where I went. I entered the structure, I made a left, went up the stairs, found the crew up there. The conditions were clear. I could see basically everything, mainly because the roof had largely burned through. We'd made a lot of natural skylights on this house. And so the visibility was very, very good for the most part up on the second floor. A lot of debris, a lot of insulation down on the floor. Obviously the debris from the walls that we've been pulling, overhaul to make sure that, there's no extension. And started working in one of the bedrooms on the Alpha side of the structure, sending boxes of personal possessions down the stairs, just kind of set up a nice little human chain to get everything out. And we got a call from operations requesting us to go down to the bedroom at the Delta side of the structure. So we were going to have to work our way down the entire length of the structure.
Still on the second floor?
Still on the second floor to the master bedroom, because the homeowners were asking if their fireproof box was in their bedroom. They were looking for their paperwork, all those important documents that we put in fire safe boxes. So I had one of my lieutenants at the time was up there with me, and I looked at Corey and said, "Hey, would you come with me down to the far end of the structure, and we'll see if we can find this box that we're supposed to be looking for." Acknowledged it with operations, said we're going to be moving. We're heading down to the Delta side. And we could see that, the furnace room had been pretty much central to the structure on the first floor. And we could see that there was some damage to the floor joists as we were walking. The floor was very, very spongy. I don't know if they'd used the greatest flooring material on this structure when they built it, but I feel that the floor was rather spongy. And so we were kind of sounding our way along, making sure that we weren't going to fall through. And unfortunately, I must have not sounded in the proper area, and I ended up breaking through the floor with my right leg and falling right through down to my waist. The only thing that kept me really from continuing the rest of the way through the floor was my air pack hung up on one of the joists and kept me hanging there, feet through the floor on the first floor and the rest of me up on the second floor.
Were you ahead of the other firefighter or behind him?
I was. So Corey was directly behind me, and we were working our way down, trying to, you kind of guesstimate. All right, so if the joists are every 16 inches, just trying to pace along and make sure we were over top. And I just missed that one step and went right through. I was caught off balance and went right through with my right leg. My left leg buckled under me, so the air pack and my knee kind of caught me, but I was kind of cockeyed in the hole and couldn't get myself out. I was rather stuck there for a few seconds.
So was a mayday called or anything to summons additional help, or
a mayday wasn't called, and that's because when my foot went through the floor, one of our other chiefs was walking into that room and happened to be standing underneath me when I went through, and I kicked him in the head. And he as well had just arrived on the scene a little bit after me. And so, his first experience of this fire was walking into the living room and getting kicked in the head. But Corey, who had also taken fast as well, he was immediately behind me, grabbed my shoulder straps and worked to pull me back out. And so no mayday was called, but an announcement was made regarding the condition of the floor, the condition of the structure at that point. I did evacuate the structure at that point. Corey and I left because it hurt. It hurt significantly. I wanted to make sure I hadn't caught anything through the turnout gear, but it was quite painful. And so he helped me back out of the structure, get me down the stairs, get me outside, back to medical to make sure that nothing had happened.
All right. So where were you hurting? Was your leg hurting, back hurting? What was hurting?
So it was my right leg, right up, went right to the hip. So you can imagine all the other parts that got hurt in the way. But it was largely my knee and my thigh that had taken much of the insult. It was just. I could feel like a couple of some of the fastening material had hit me, but thankfully nothing went through the turnout gear, nothing punctured, nothing cut. But I was bruised for a few days afterwards. I had some pretty rough looking bruises to my leg.
All right, so he pulls you out.
Yep.
You guys make an announcement about the weakened floor. Hey, guess what we discovered?
Yep.
And so you come out. Do you have a conversation with command? Do you go over to EMS? Where do you head from there?
So as soon as we exited the structure, the operations chief came over to me and asked me what was up, made sure I was okay. He'd heard the yelling and whatnot from the first floor. He'd heard it, and so he came over to me and made sure I was okay. I said, listen, the floor is pretty well shot up on the second floor. And after just giving him that quick little brief, I said, I'm going to head over to medical and make sure that everything is okay. So we have at that time we had one ambulance dedicated to any structure scene. We've actually since increased it countywide. Now they're asking for 2 ambulances to stand by at every working fire. One for obviously civilian transport, victims of the fire. The other for firefighter safety and rehabilitation, and to work alongside the rapid intervention team. So I went over to the ambulance. Co-workers actually from the Town of Coxsackie Ambulance. So a little bit of ball busting went on, and made sure, good humor, but made sure I was okay. Sat there for a little while. They asked me if I needed to be rehabbed. I said, I've done 5 minutes worth of work. I don't need to be rehabbed yet. I just got here. But I kind of sat out for a little while because it was there was no real heavy work that I was going to be able to do for the rest of that fire.
All right. So when you all get done on the incident and back and cleaned up, and would your department, as a matter of standard practice, do any kind of an after action review or a discussion about, hey, what went well, where what didn't, where is it, or would that be normal after every structure fire like this? And did you guys do something like that after this event, especially in light of what happened to you?
Yeah, we do. So after every major incident, we'll say, structure fires, major traffic accidents, those sorts of things, we'll do an after-action review back at the firehouse. There's some informality, some formality. You do a little bit while you're cleaning hose and packing trucks back up, but then we'll sit down and actually go over anything that, like you said, went really well, could have gone better, didn't go so well. And so my incident was brought up at that after action review. I will say it was a mix of general camaraderie, joking, but then also there was some serious concern to make sure that I was okay, that it was basically announced, so Matt fell through the floor and kicked Jared in the head. That was basically the way that whole conversation was prefaced. But then, we talked about a little bit about why it happened. At the time, my explanation for it was, the floor was spongy and I went through, not quite realizing that my awareness of what had happened in that house and all of the steps leading up to it, I wasn't recognizing them at that point. It's only been since then that I've had a chance to reflect on it and say, man, I kind of wish I could have that after action review back to highlight some things with my crews, which I've since done and talked about, not necessarily in that setting of that fire, but since then saying, there was a lack of situational awareness that was going on that led up to me falling through this floor. At the time, it really was just, the floor was spongy and I fell through. I happened to be the lucky guy that stepped in that wrong spot, and there it is. So that was kind of the extent of the conversation regarding that. We didn't get too much into the how, the hows and the whys.
Yeah. So you said your awareness was impacted. What were some of the things that you would contribute to what caused an impact to your awareness at this incident that was kind of like the lead up to that?
Yeah. So, as I said, the entire incident started when I was, 5 miles away, 6 miles away at an obligation where all I could hear was just the very outset. So I knew there was a fire and I knew where it was, but I didn't know anything else really. I had no idea how long it took for, I knew crews were arriving relatively quickly, but I knew, I didn't know how long it had taken for, the initial attack to be made, how long it took to get to the point where we could say, okay, this fire is extinguished. Now we're entering into overhaul. I had no idea I didn't know where the fire had really burned, what damage is this damage simply smoke. You can see smoke, you can see char, you can see water damage, but I hadn't seen the fire really doing its thing. And so just that ignorance of knowing what the fire was doing, the delayed response to the scene, the split attention between my kids, finding a babysitter, trying to listen to a pager, trying to, I was multitasking very poorly in terms of, figuring out what needed to be done next, and then finally getting on scene. And, the weather definitely was playing some role in this. I was bitter cold the moment I stepped outside of my vehicle. I can't imagine what, the crews that were there, they're into this an hour and a half already. And, I'm showing up, I'm in dry turnout gear, and I'm freezing cold. So, knowing some of the hazards of the house, I'm thinking about that big cliff off the back. I'm not thinking about any problems that are inside the structure. And then just the simplicity of the task that I was involved in. You think, okay, people get hurt doing roof operations. They get hurt doing suppression. They get hurt doing rescue. Who gets hurt during salvage and overhaul? This is the safe period of time. This is everything's slowing down. Everything's becoming a little bit more low key. We're in some bedroom cleaning out a teenager's possessions so that they can have them. And I'm going down to find a fireproof box. How dangerous can this task possibly be? And just not recognizing, the amount of water that had been poured into the structure and the amount of weight that had placed on that floor, and the condition of the floor maybe before the fire even happened. I don't know. So there was just a string of things that I would point to and say, this kept me from being really aware of what the situation was, so that when I was walking down that hallway, my mind was somewhere completely different than where it needed to be in terms of the condition of that structure.
Now, one thing we didn't cover, but I'm just going to swing back.
Yeah.
So for that floor above to be weakened, then the fire had to come from below.
Yeah. So
from down below, and maybe you never went in at that level to look, but from down below, if you were down below where the guy you kicked in the head was, and you looked up,
yeah,
you might have seen a degree of damage there that would indicate that might not be safe to walk on. But I'm going to assume you never looked at it from that vantage point before you walked on that floor above. Is that correct?
I'd given it a cursory look as I went up. We entered through the main door of the house, and it was kind of behind, walking straight into the house. The utility room was back and a little bit to the right. And so I looked up, and, the sheetrock had been pulled in that area, and I could see some charring along the beams. But the flooring material looked to be relatively intact. It didn't look like it had, that much damage, a little bit of smoke, and just that preliminary look that it gets, not a full char or anything. And as I went upstairs, my mind was, well, we have crews on the second floor already. So if we got people up there, they're moving around, they're doing work. Surely the floor is reasonably safe. I didn't think about, perhaps the other areas closer to the seat of the fire, close to the origin. And I would say that the area that I fell through wasn't so much fire damage that caused that floor to fail. It was the water that had just so degraded the material that's what gave way. The bulk of the fire damage was another 2 or 3 bays, stud bays down the line.
And so what are your takeaways? What are your lessons that learned from this event that you could look back now and say, I would do something different. I would teach and coach other people to do something different than what I did because of what happened to me. I learned I'm smarter now. So I want other people to learn and be smarter. So here's some of the things that I would say are the takeaways.
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost is just that having an understanding as far as you're able of the situation before you enter into it. I had that opportunity and I didn't take it. I wasn't the first arriving unit. I wasn't coming into an unknown situation. The scene was very well stabilized by the time I got there. And so I should have taken the time with command, first of all, to figure out, what had been done, what the timeline had looked like before my arrival. And then I should have taken additional time with the operations sector to do the same thing, see, okay, where are we in, this sort of, in our tasks at this point, what's been done, what hasn't been done, have there been any problems yet? I don't know if there were any other problems with that fire. Nobody had said, hey, yeah, Steve fell through earlier, or Joe put his foot, I hadn't heard of any incidents, and to this day, I've never heard of any others coming from that fire. Nobody said, oh yeah, I did too. But I would want to go back and talk to, the operations chief and say, what hazards have we found so far that I should be aware of? Is the floor spongy in areas? Is the floor weakened? Are we concerned about any areas of this structure? So I really wish I could, especially having, as I said, arrived at a situation that was well under control. I had the time to do it, and I did. I went right to work, just as I would anticipate anybody would want to. Anybody in the fire service is going to want to get right to work. I should have taken just those few extra moments to get a little bit more information, and I think that quite well could have kept this incident from happening.
So what advice would you give to someone who is, say, a late arriver on an incident? After a fire's been knocked down, you're not in the unique circumstance of having a delayed response as a callback or come from home or somewhere else volunteer. And, a lot of times people have to, take care of things, button things up, get something done before they can go. And sometimes they're just out of position and they're going to be, 15 or 20 minutes getting to an incident, and they're coming in kind of seemingly after the big deal part of the incident is done. Yeah. That's, you came in, it's knocked down, it's overhaul. Give some tips or advice about those late arrivers, about what they might ask, what they might be looking for, how they might set their awareness up, how they might anticipate conditions that might be easier to understand if you watched it all unfold and you didn't. So what are some of those kind of takeaways?
So first, as we discussed, as much as we're able, I would say try and listen to radio transmissions from the scene. If your pager's on the same frequency as the fire ground, or if there's a way for you to listen to fire ground traffic, try and listen to that as closely as you can, and then definitely take the time upon arrival, slow down. Talk to command, talk to your operations, do the 360. That's something that's been ingrained in me since, my very first days of recruit school was, do the 360, do your own 360. Make sure that you're well aware of what the outside of the building, look up, look down. But then, I wasn't taking into account, weather conditions and the fact that the water we were putting into this structure wasn't going to come back out. It was was going to go in, it was going to freeze. It was going to stay right there. And that I wasn't taking that into account. So talk to the operations, figure out how long has the attack been going on? How long did it last? What, as we said, what hazards have we already uncovered? And I'm willing to bet, had I traveled down this road before, I would have seen this house. And, in terms of knowing your district, you just kind of look at a house and you go, I'm not so certain the construction of this house is up to code. How you just have those houses in your district where you can tell from the lawn that there's probably something amiss with the construction. Looking back, this is one of those houses where I would have said, yeah, there's probably some homeowner projects that haven't gone very well in this structure before. And I think that so knowing that district, or knowing that area of the district, knowing that particular house maybe would have helped me maybe be a little bit more on my toes for something to go wrong. So that's perhaps what I would say to somebody in the same situation.
Have you given any thought to how any alternate outcomes to this, like if you would have fell all the way through, or how this could have been worse as an outcome than the way?
Yeah, I was exceedingly fortunate that it was as short a fall and as noticed as it was. The fact that it was only down to my waist, the fact that my friend was right behind me at the time. It could have been, I think, far worse had the air pack not stopped me, had Corey not been there to pull me back out, had fire suppression still been going on, those sorts of activities. It could have been a far worse incident. I'm lucky that it was only some bruises, and some a bruised ego and some pain that I came out of it with, rather than some far worse injuries.
When that happened, Matt, if you can remember, and I know it's been a few years ago,
mm-hmm.
but if you could remember, like in the moment when it was happening, I'm curious as to what your emotional state was. In other words, were you, as soon as it happened, were you surprised, embarrassed, frustrated?
I was pissed because like that shouldn't happen. Like we're late into this incident. We're in Overhaul. Like why is this happening right now? I was pissed that it had happened. And then there was a sense of panic because I didn't know how am I going to continue to fall? Am I going to, how far am I going to go with this fall? And what's going to stop me in the end? Is it going to be the first floor? Is it, what's it going to be? So, and then just relief knowing that, as I said, I had a very capable lieutenant that was right behind me to help me out, to get me down the stairs and to get me out of the structure. I was relieved to have him with me. I was quite fortunate to have him right there. So, and then the embarrassment.
Yeah. Now, I assume you didn't realize that you had kicked that other person in the head at the moment that you had felt.
Not at first, no.
So that came out later, that you had kind of whacked him. Now, was he okay from?
He was, yeah. It was. I caught him square on the top of the helmet. I didn't cause him any damage apart from again the frustration of why is Marlow's foot coming through the floor and kicking me right now?
Yeah.
He was fine. He didn't get injured at all.
Yeah. Well, we can kind of chuckle about it now, but the weight of your body coming down on the top of his helmet could have very easily caused a cervical spine fracture.
Yes.
With the downward compression on his head. So the fact that that didn't happen, we can breathe a sigh of relief. We can chuckle a little bit about it. But for you and for him, if circumstances were just slightly different than the way they played out, this could have been a very significant, it could have been the kind of event, even for you, that the injuries could have been ending to your career, both full-time career and volunteer fire service. And the fact that it didn't turn out bad, the listeners and viewers should not dismiss it and say, oh, this is such a minor event. It turned out minor, but it held major potential.
Well, and I went back and forth on, do I send Rich an email about this? I said, perhaps not so much the incident itself. It's a minor incident, but knowing, my experience in the volunteer fire service, where our responses are very delayed at times, and we're not always working with as much information as we'd like. It was much more not so much the incident, but the lack of situational awareness leading up to it. And as you and I discussed, I believe before we really began the interview, it's only been listening to you and to your material that's got me to go back to this and say, why did that happen? Was it really just a fluke of construction, or, my foot just happened to step in the wrong spot? Or was there a chain of events that led up to this that kept me from really seeing the potential for, an incident to occur? So yeah, falling through the floor, kicking a buddy in the head, seems minor, but it's the chain before that can lead to something far worse.
Well, you have been a good student of the lessons. When you can take an incident like this, reflect back upon it, and ask yourself in hindsight, what were those lead up circumstances about how this all unfolded in a way that led to the sharp end outcome, and to be conscientious enough of the fact that there's always a backstory. There's always a lead up. There's always things that are contributing and piling on. And it isn't just when your foot went through the floor and down you went, but it was a series of things, couldas and shouldas and would'ves and if only I'das, that kind of set this whole scenario up. And I give you credit for just not dismissing it as a coincidental, happenstance, one-off kind of thing, but to be reflective enough to say, I might have been able to keep this from happening. And I certainly want to learn a lot about how it happened, because I don't want it to happen again to me.
Well, and I don't want it to happen to the next firefighter.
Right.
If I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of new incoming recruits, and I may not tell that story every time, but I talk to them about what I've learned from it, because I don't want them to be the next person to fall through the floor. I don't want them to be the next person who gets injured because something that they could have found out, something that they could have known, ended up not getting to them and causing an accident to occur. If somebody else can learn from me, then.
Well, Matt, a lot of times in my classes, I have discussions with the participants about their near-miss events. Who's had one? Share your story. What are your kind of takeaways? Kind of like everything that we just did here, but only the summary version, like a 3-minute version, and we'll just get 2 or 3 of those to be told during class, just to kind of put a frame around why we're here talking about situational awareness for the day. And like yours, there's some pretty amazing stories that are being told in the front end of these classes, And I will tell these people, you really need to come on the show and do a podcast and share what happened and your lessons learned. You'll be surprised how many of them like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And it's like, why? Why not be a teacher? Why not raise your hand and say, look, this happened to me. I'm not proud that it did, but it did. And if you can learn from it and not have it happen to you, then the fire service collectively is made smarter and safer from these lessons being shared. But so many of them won't step up and share them. And even when you sent me the email, you kind of summarized, the event that had happened, but you didn't explicitly say, and I'd like to be a guest on the show. I had to follow back around to you and say, is this a thinly veiled request to actually be a guest on the show? And then you reply, which I was looking at it when I was setting up for the show. It was like, well, I hadn't, really hadn't thought about it, but if you think it'll be valuable to others, then yeah, I'll come on and share it. So many won't.
I was really just saying thank you to you for helping me understand it better. But as you said, I certainly I will suffer the embarrassment of telling that story to a million people so that a few can learn. It's what makes all of us better.
Thank you for coming on the show, sharing the experience about what happened, teaching me a little bit about beer making. Now you got my interest. I'm gonna have to look into this a little further, and I just have a feeling that my beer making efforts would be a train wreck. But I'm gonna kind of I won't say I'm not gonna commit to it, but I'm gonna kind of look into it and see what it takes and see if I can give a swing at it, because it's intriguing to be able to do that. But thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing your experience. Thanks to your family for gifting you the time to spend with me this morning. And I think the fire service will be thankful for the experience that you shared, the lessons you shared, your honesty about how you shared it, and how humble you were about talking about the things that happened. So thank you.
Well, Rich, thank you for the opportunity, for just the way you continually work to share these lessons and to add your own insight and all the work that you've done. As I said, I've learned a tremendous deal from you, and it's really an honor to join you and to talk about these things. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Fire Chief Matt Marlow, for sharing your near-miss story on our show today. If you've been listening to the episodes for the last couple of months, you might have heard me mention our 5th anniversary and a giveaway that we're doing to celebrate it. Well, little did I know that there are rules and laws that need to be followed when you do a giveaway. And it turns out we can't just give stuff away, which is unfortunate. In fact, we can't even call it a giveaway because that's not a legal term. We have to call it a sweepstakes. So we're going to have a sweepstakes. And I'm learning a lot about how to have a sweepstakes, including the rules and the disclosures that we have to do if we want to do it legally. And of course we want to do it legally. So unfortunately, that means there's going to be a delay and a process and rules and all the crap that I would have rather have avoided, but I can't. So stay tuned. But the good news is the prizes provided by our sponsors and our supporters are growing and are worth more than $2,000 now. The Situational Awareness Matters show was launched in 2014 with a purpose to give a platform to those who've had near-miss events to share their stories, like the one you just heard. When I'm on the road delivering classes on situational awareness, I often hear attendees tell their near-miss event stories, and they have shared some amazing renditions of what happened to them. And stories like the recent interview you just listened to with Matt Marlow, it was what motivated me to launch this podcast in the first place, so those lessons could be shared with a bigger audience, you. The Situational Awareness Matters show, podcasted as SAMatters Radio, and our companion video program, SAMatters TV channel on YouTube, along with other videos that we have posted, have enjoyed over 800,000 downloads, and I am so thankful for your support. I feel so honored to be able to provide a platform for these amazing stories to be shared. If you like the show, please do me a solid favor and subscribe. For the audio version of the show, it's SAMatters Radio on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and iHeartRadio. For the video version, subscribe to SAMatters TV on YouTube. And if you like and value the show, I'd really appreciate it if you would give it a rating and a review. Your ratings and reviews help others to find the show, but more importantly, that kind of feedback inspires me to want to work harder for you.
I think Rich's ability to connect with any crowd, that's a gift that he has, and it's easily transferable.
This is the second or third time that I've heard him speak. There's some teeth to the information that he brings.
It's been really good. Good mixes. He knows when to throw in a joke here and there to get you back involved.
Some tools. I'm a new lieutenant, so very, very interesting. And some of these things I can take back to the station and use with some of the new firefighters I have on my crew.
Something to get you thinking about your job more, big picture type stuff. I've seen him before. A good review for sure.
I have heard him before, yes. After he speaks, there's usually an enlightenment because now they're more aware of what's going on around them and what they're experiencing as they respond to calls.
He's very, very knowledgeable. I'm enjoying it so far.
And that intuition, that's a big one. The video that he just showed up here, we're getting a lot out of this. I think this is a really good seminar, especially for new people and old. Well, I think it's very informative. This talk gives us more ammunition to do all three.
They're relatable to what we have experienced or very well could experience, so he makes it easy to let the knowledge sink in.
I mean, it's awesome. A lot of stories you can usually relate to yourself and calls you have been on, aha moment. Like, he just helps you focus on picking out the right things. It's awesome. It's a refresher and keeps my eyes open. It's good stuff.
If people listen to the message that he has, it's an incredible message delivered by a very compassionate person. Strategy and tactics are going to always change. Situational awareness it doesn't change. It's always there.
He's got some good stories to tell, and he's very thorough with his stories, and it's interesting listening to him.
Very clear speaker, and he talks on our level because he's been there, he's been in the trenches. I think he's doing well, and I'm looking forward to the second half.
Since 2007, Situational Awareness Matters instructors have helped more than 1,300 organizations and have trained over 80,000 individuals to help improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, public transportation operators, aviation workers, oil refinery process operators, and more. If you or someone you know works in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, we're here to help improve your safety and your survival, and to help you accomplish the most important mission of all, and that is to go home to the ones who love you. I would like to take a moment to thank and honor the companies, organizations, agencies, and departments that have hosted recent Situational Awareness Matters training for their team members. The Scott Township Fire Department in Evansville, Indiana, the Maryland Fire Chiefs Association, Flight Bridge ED Fast 19 Conference. If you're interested in where we're going to be upcoming, here's the schedule. On May 19th, we're going to be at the Buckley Fire Department in Buckley, Washington. On May 21, we will be at the Washington State Fire Chiefs Association Conference in Kennewick, Washington. Then on June 5 to 13, I'm going north, way north, to the Syncrude Oil Refinery in Fort McMurray, Alberta, where we are in the process of training 900 oil refinery operators on situational awareness and high-risk decision-making. On June 15th, I will be at the National Volunteer Fire Council Summit in Portland, Oregon. On June 17th, I'll be at the National Fire Protection Association Conference in San Antonio, Texas. On June 24 and 25, I'll be at the Odessa Fire Department in Odessa, Texas. On July 24 and 25, I'll be at the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And then on July 26th, I'll be at the North Metro Fire District in Broomfield, Colorado. If you want to see all the locations of the upcoming SAMatters tour stops, just go over to our website, SAMatters.com, and the schedule is under the Training Programs tab on the top of the homepage. If you're interested in hosting a program, just click the Contact Us tab on the top of the homepage, and I will give you a call. If you want to become part of the SAMatters community of learners, there's several ways you can do that. Just check the show notes for how you can get connected with us by signing up for our monthly newsletter, by subscribing to the SAMatters radio podcast show, by subscribing to the SAMatters TV YouTube channel, and how to follow us on the social media channels of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. There we're sharing ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Oh, and occasionally I share pictures of hotel carpets, but that's a different story for a different day. Well, that's it. Episode 266 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, Fire Chief Matt Marlow. Thank you to our awesome sponsor, Midwest Fire. If you're in the market for a pumper tanker, or a brush truck, you need to check them out at MidwestFire.com. Thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. Thank you to all the companies, agencies, and organizations and associations that have hosted Situational Awareness Matters training programs. Thank you to all the organizations that have hosted live stream training programs where I come to your organization live via the internet to train your members. Thank you to the more than 3,000 students and graduates of the highly acclaimed Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. The feedback I received from the Academy graduates is just amazing and quite humbling, and I thank you for that. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SAMatters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit SAMatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.